So we'll be with you shortly, folks. We're just waiting for more people to arrive, and we'll start in a couple of minutes. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Supercharging Innovation. I'm Gary Bernstein. I'm the Chief Executive of Technology Leaders, and I'm delighted to host your seminar and webinar this morning. We had over 200 senior business leaders and innovators signed up to join us today, and we have to thank the support from our friends at the CVI, the Institute of Directors, the Federation for Small Business, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, and the Global Tech Advocate community. And what a special time it is to be discussing innovation, as we've seen the world's creativity quotient skyrocket over the last few months, with people, organisations and institutions finding ingenious solutions to the many obstacles the pandemic has actually put in our way. And I know our guest speakers, Ian Campbell, Mark Gillen and Andrew Guild, have been working absolutely flat out all the way through the lockdown. So we're hugely grateful to them for making time to be with us today. Now, I know they've got some very valuable insights and reflections from the Ventilator Challenge to share with us. Learnings that can help us as directors better respond to the extraordinary opportunities that are emerging for UK companies in this unfamiliar and fast changing trading environment. And the outstanding success of the Ventilator Challenge has also helped nudge the Chancellor and his chums at the Treasury to find some extra support for our innovation endeavours in the form of a unique state-sponsored recovery effort for the companies that are going to help rebuild and rebalance our future economy. So if you're leading efforts in quantum, renewables, or personalised medicine, you know, and many other areas, we'll explore what new support is in the pipeline for you and our businesses in this webinar. Now, the webinar is actually going to be run in kind of two halves. We'll start with 3 short presentations from our panelists. Mark's going to cover innovation lessons from the Ventilator Challenge. Andrew will do a deeper dive into one of the new practices that compresses product development time. And Ian is going to share what new government-backed support there is for innovation and some tips on how we can get access to that as well. We'll top and tail the presentations with a couple of polls, and the second half of the webinar will be a Q&A with our panelists. So we're saving all the questions to the end of the presentations. But don't delay, get your questions in, and you can submit those and promote your questions anonymously anytime using the Q&A function in your Zoom controls. So look out for where they are right now. If your question is for a specific panelist, please put their name at the start of your question. That will really help us manage the conversation. And we'll do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can. So before we kick off, I'd like to do a quick poll, which is reflecting on what we've learned as business leaders from the experience of lockdown. Have we, learnt more about leading remotely, how to adapt our business models, accelerating our innovation, or developing personal resilience? And I'll give you a moment to kind of answer in on that. The last few coming through now. And I'll end the poll now, and I'll share those results for you. So way out in the lead is adapting our ways of working. I don't think there's much surprise really there in that, but sharing bottom place is accelerating innovation and how to lead remotely as well. So no surprises there. So let's switch over to the main event. Our first guest is Professor Mark Gillen, Chief Technology Officer at Innovate UK. Mark directs delivery of the agency's programmes that create economic growth through business-led innovation. He's held engineering leadership roles in Formula One, including head of race team at Williams, served as CEO of a renewable energy firm, and as a visiting professor at the University of Surrey. Mark, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much. And I just share my screen. So hopefully you can, I just go into slideshow. You should be able to see that now. So as Gary mentioned, I just spent the next sort of 10 minutes discussing what was actually a very intense period in the sort of beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and the response on the ventilator challenge, and the impact that the F1 teams had on support of it. And in terms of the actual challenge, I think the clear challenge was to manufacture and deliver respiratory devices, obviously to help support the NHS. And I think really we're looking at sort of four main areas: innovation, collaboration, working at pace in a highly regulated and dynamic environment. And I think even within F1, probably underestimated the dynamic environment as the learning process increased with our understanding of COVID-19 developing. And also the regulatory aspects of working with MHRA on the approval side and making sure that the product was obviously, which was coming, was fit for purpose. And then finally, understanding the sort of complex systems. In terms of the actual timeline, just to give you a feel, and I had some quotes, and these are quotes actually I did at the time. I think it was for a Guardian piece, but to capture sort of a point in time, and I still put them in. So Project Pit Lane, I remember very, very clearly, it started on the 15th, which was a Sunday in March. It was actually the weekend of the Australian Grand Prix, which never happened. And it was very clear, having spent sort of a career in F1, that the teams weren't going racing for a while, and the capability of the teams from their digital design side, ability to rapid manufacture systems, competitive analysis, understanding of those complex systems, and reverse engineering solutions could be extremely helpful in what was a very recent sort of national call to arms to help accelerate the design and production of ventilator units are of national need. So I phoned up Pat Simmons and a couple of others in F1, and it turned out I certainly wasn't the only one with that idea. And very, very quickly, within a few days, we had all the F1 UK teams around the table discussing how they could help. Not just the teams, but also their supply chain and the engineering arm. So it was a fantastic response. And just looking at sort of the lessons sort of learnt along the way, I would sort of really capture them into sort of 4 buckets. First one, on the innovation side, we were really looking at a mix of different devices, and this is always the same sort of in some of these areas. You've got to deal with a range of different topics. So we were looking at complex existing intensive care unit machines. So these were machines that were being produced at very low numbers, but we had to scale them up. We're looking at very early stage prototypes. And also non-invasive ventilation systems, such as what's called CPAP, or continuous positive air pressure systems. And I'll show you an example of that later. And then we did a number of other systems which weren't related to this, but actually were serving obviously the national need. So in terms of just to give you just a feel for what we were looking at, on the top right hand of the diagram, what happened is Ian on the call today got a phone call out of the blue from a professor in the National Health Service saying that they had a early stage prototype of a mechanical ventilation system. So that was on the Friday night. I think it was around about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, just after sort of our initial kickoff of Project Pitplane. On the Saturday afternoon, we had it on the bench in the Red Bull race bay, which is what you see here, all set up, and you can see a sort of a bit of a mock-up of a control box and system, and that was operating. So within 24 hours of the call, we had the system already operational. I'll just give you a feel for the rate at which things were developing. So the pace was extremely tight lines. We had a lot of stress also in the supply chain because the whole of the world was looking to rapid manufacture these systems. So when you develop a system, say in the top right hand corner of the picture, you break it down into the individual components, or called the bill of materials. Everything from, say, the ambu bag, that blue bag, through to the control systems. You end up with a set of parts with this bill of materials, or the BOM as it's called. But what you were finding is, because everybody in the world was after manufacturing ventilators, some of those bill of materials were actually conflicted. So you had certain key components, such as, say, electric motors or other bits, that you had maybe 20, 30 different countries all looking to try and race to get them. So managing that bill of materials and understanding maybe how to even reverse engineer certain components to deconflict the bill of materials was a significant issue. The other area, sort of bucket looking at, was the collaboration. And F1 are natural competitors. They fight tooth and nail every week or every fortnight at the track. But that said, they're actually run very complementary systems. So that actually worked in their favor. So when you were getting all the teams together, they were very au fait with the other team's systems. So the CAD system, the sort of rapid manufacturing system. So we had literally hundreds of staff members all working together, and it was really interesting to watch different teams, say even in the Red Bull race bay, working together as one, and that was the key. So effectively as a single virtual company. And we are also engaging with a wider consortium. So outside of Project Pitplane, we were working with the bigger consortiums run, say, by High Value Manufacturing Catapult, which is a partner of Innovate UK. And actually the teams provided support in terms of personnel support for the testing and manufacture of these devices. But I wanted just to show you sort of, how this device and particularly the complexity of things developed so quickly. So for instance, we took this device, which was originally called Remora, on the top right-hand corner in the Saturday. Within 3.5 weeks, we had gone from the device which you see up top to the device down the bottom, and was ready for MHRA type approval. So multiple iterations. Using a digital twin, we had created a Simulink model within 2 days of the development, and we created a development path from initial idea to product, made it really acute, minimal reverse or minimal sort of reverse activities in terms of having to do multiple iterations. And within those 3.5 weeks, at a timeline that typically would take about 3 years, we had gone from on the bench to a really polished product. And that just showing you the benefit and the pace in which things were working at. So just in terms of success, it was a very tight timeline. Project Pitlane, in addition to helping support the sort of the more traditional devices, such as the Penland and Smiths of this world with the other consortium members, I would particularly like to point out and take out Mercedes. So Mercedes, with UCL, developed a CPAP device, which is the device you see in the bottom corner here. And they created over 10,000 of these devices in a very short timeline. These were devices which are sort of the intermediate step to ventilation, full mechanical ventilation. And that was transformative. And the pace at which they did that was unbelievable, even from an F1 perspective. So I think it was a really, just to finish, a really fulfilling period. I guess what kept us on target was it was a really significant, working with the clinicians and hearing their stories. And I mentioned just before we joined, we even had stories of clinicians cutting up a scuba equipment at the beginning of this pandemic. That's how serious things we're looking at, because we didn't know where the peak was going to come. Thankfully, the peak, certainly on the first wave, was not as extreme as expected, but it gave you a feel for the rate at which we were working on. And certainly, I guess from our side looking back, it was, I think, a very clear example how F1 working together were able to develop something outside of their traditional sort of sphere of design, but actually just showed their ability to do things at pace in these highly regulated environments.
Mark, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant insight into that particular project, and we've got some questions already for you to come back to at the end of the presentations about how all that worked. And I guess we should have expected it to be a high-speed product development with Formula One. But we're now going to pass over to Andrew Guild, who's founder and director of Render Product Development. Andrew leads a team of engineers, artists and inventors in efforts to create exciting new products for some of the world's leading brands. Andy, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Gary. I'll just share my screen here. So hello and good morning. I'm Andrew Guild, as Gary said, co-founder of Render Product Development. Greetings from my kitchen/office. Our team are still basing themselves from home because we are adapted to perform all of our duties remotely anyway, so why risk it? I hope you're all safe and well. We've been absolutely flat out during lockdown, and I hope you have been too. Taking a break to speak to you wonderful people is a nice change from the day-to-day, but I have to say my job is pretty interesting, so I'm very lucky. It's been so much harder to innovate and prototype during lockdown, so our unique offering has been very much in demand, allowing businesses and entrepreneurs to actually accelerate innovation during a very challenging time. Our company was born from 50 years experience in successfully commercializing products and serving some of the world's most renowned brands. We know what works and what doesn't. We've been on your side of the table and understand the risks involved in getting a product to market and fully recognize the importance of your commercial goals. We've been there and we've done it. Our heritage and experience has been absolutely key to the internationalization of new products and accelerating new innovation projects even during the pandemic. Much of our success has been due to the prioritization of digital twinning. Now, we're not massive fans of using jargon, so for all of you fellow anti-jargonites, let me explain what digital twinning is. So quite simply, a digital twin is a virtual model of a process, product, or service. So how do we use digital twinning to improve the product development process? So we create a digital twin of a new product or concept, which immediately reduces the requirement for repetitive prototyping. The use of a digital twin dramatically improves communication with collaborators. Mark obviously touched on that. In our line of work, that can include the likes of patent attorneys, manufacturers, investors, etc., with the use of a perfectly engineered photorealistic representation of the new product or process. People cannot and have not been able to meet during the pandemic, so we've provided a digital solution which has not just kept the doors open to opportunities which may have otherwise disappeared when COVID kicked in, but has actually opened doors to new opportunities. We build materials that can be recycled, so whether that be for engineering or pitching, for example, and this encourages you to make iterations and take advantage of the flexibility that the virtual design offers. When repetitively physically prototyping, you might be a bit more apprehensive about making changes due to the time and cost involved. However, designing and engineering our way allows you to make alterations easily and test new designs without fear of racking up a huge bill. As an added bonus, you can recycle the materials for marketing purposes and such like, which allows you to go toe-to-toe with bigger brands. So it's basically using a digital twin to its full capacity allows you to cover everything from really conceptual design right through to showcasing a viable and manufacturable product. So you can see the typical, albeit yet simplified, product development journey is littered with expensive and laborious tasks. Some of the actions are executed at the wrong time and do not present maximum value. Our typical journey is much shorter, as you'll see, and by efficiently maximizing the value of the digital twin, we are significantly de-risking the experience. We can widen the stakeholder contribution by making it easier to share, test, and communicate design through the use of digital materials. It's a far more coherent and interactive process, and the efficiencies massively reduce the risk involved during the R&D period. So often responsibilities can be too segregated during the product development process and can also contribute to an unnecessarily long and expensive journey. To understand the importance of considering the bigger picture, this means recognizing your business's strategy and the chain reaction our services will have on the rest of the project. The main benefits of understanding the bigger picture are, it allows you to recycle materials, so you can see there, your prototype twin can be recycled for marketing, presentations, and technical communication with manufacturers. Saves time because there's less, obviously you saw from the timeline, there's fewer laborious steps involved. Saves money because there's less physical prototyping and design iterations are easier to make, therefore less expensive. It provides an opportunity for collaboration, as I said earlier, e.g. between patent attorneys and design engineers, for example. And it de-risks the process, so there's less investment and time required to get you to market. Big picture thinking is mega important. As much as digital twinning offers efficiencies, if you don't consider and plan the effects of the digital twin, you're not receiving maximum value from its use. If used correctly, a digital twin can positively impact the entire journey. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly show you a couple of case examples demonstrating how digital twinning has benefited two very different businesses. One product is fairly complex and the other is relatively simple. Rixel Recovery produced the world's first sport and injury recovery cuff. The cuffs are designed to be applied to different parts of the body, reducing post-exercise muscle soreness, increasing the speed of recovery, and improving muscle elasticity. It's a wearable product designed for both athletes and non-athletes. As you'll see from the evolution diagram, we have developed the product and its design from a very simple 2D drawing illustrated on the left-hand side. And this has evolved to a photorealistic, perfectly engineered representation in the form of a digital twin illustrated on the right-hand side. So what did this business achieve with the proper use of a digital twin? So the journey from concept to manufacturable product was much quicker. Through high quality visuals, depth was added to a simple product. It improved communication and it enhanced the entrepreneur's sales pitch. They won awards for the product and used the digital twin to complement a rough, low-cost prototype. Released much less equity in the business at an early stage as the development process required less investment. And to this day, our digital twin has actually been recycled to use in frequent marketing campaigns. So let me introduce you to DTGen. So DTGen are a big hitter in the generator market, serving the likes of hospitals, football stadiums, and large manufacturing businesses, and they serve throughout the UK. We assisted them with the design and presentation of a new gas-powered generator. During this project, we created more flexible and customizable design, allowing our client to get to market quicker while satisfying the changing needs of their customers. So again, what did the proper use of a digital twin help this business achieve? So it helped them to secure new and lucrative contracts, helped them to communicate an unfamiliar product in a simple way. It helped the adjustment of engineering to cater for bespoke clients, and that was a relatively straightforward process. Marketing materials were recycled from the digital twin, which allowed it to give it a little bit of a competitive edge over suppliers, and communication with manufacturers was made much simpler. So how to take advantage of a digital twin when developing your product? So firstly, think outside the box. Don't fixate on doing it the traditional way. It's the 21st century and there's lots of tools available to make that journey better. Secondly, ensure your project's participants are aligned. There's great value in ensuring everyone is contributing towards the same goal. So Mark obviously again touched on this earlier. For example, if your patent attorney and design engineer are very well aligned, this will avoid you incurring legal costs or design costs unnecessarily, which both can be very costly. Thirdly, question everything until you find the best method for finding success. Question why your development process is the best method of procedure. You'll be amazed by the amount of tech that's available right now to make that journey much smoother. And lastly, embrace change. Now is not the time to be stuck in the dark ages and throw unnecessary time and money at getting a product or process to market. Get with the times and realize there's a better, more efficient way, and digital twinning is a really great example of that. A lot of our clients have had to make rapid alterations to make their product more COVID appropriate. Had we not been available to assist them and had they decided to use a more traditional method, they wouldn't have been able to make the changes in time and the products may have become redundant. So being able to act quickly and work flexibly has really been the key to our success during lockdown and the key to our clients' success when trying to develop their products. So how can we help? So innovate smarter. If you have an idea for a physical product and want to design it efficiently, a digital twin can be a really effective solution. Communicate better. So whether you're hoping to attract fresh investment, win awards, create credibility, or explain your product or process succinctly, again, a digital twin can really help you do that. And lastly, focus on quality. So prototyping is a really good example there. Our efficient prototyping process can help you achieve maximum value from your physical modeling. So digital twinning allows us to absorb much of the typical risks before we even think about physically prototyping, making what is usually an expensive and laborious part of the process much more streamlined and free of unnecessary risk. Well, ladies and gents, thanks very much. That's all from me. I'll pass you over to Gary.
Well, thanks very much, Andy. That gives a good feel for the work that you do for your clients, and really the kind of power and flexibility of digital twinning. I think, you know, we're not going to be doing a lot of business models these days, so we need to get something of our products in the hands of our customers, be the proxy of the products before we return to normal again. So thanks again for that. Our final guest is Dr. Ian Campbell, Interim Executive Chair at Innovate UK. Ian leads the agency in its efforts to de-risk and incentivise the UK company investment in R&D, and he served as CEO of a number of successful UK health and life sciences scale-ups that pioneered the adoption of new diagnostic tools. Ian, thanks so much for being with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Gary, and good morning to everybody. I'm just going to put this onto full screen, and then I'm hoping that you'll be able to see it. Excellent. So by way of introduction, for those of you that are not familiar, Innovate UK is the UK government's innovation agency. And it's here to serve really two big purposes. I'm hoping, can you see slide 2 now? Is that changed? Perfect. Yeah, and we're really here to serve two purposes, and that's to support businesses with innovative ideas to grow and scale, and to do that either through funding or through advising. And they're equally important, and we need to be clear that as well as providing sources of capital, we can also link you into unique networks and supply chains, such as the one that Mark talked about earlier, to drive competitive advantage for your business. And sometimes we overlook that, and we concentrate mainly on the funding, but there is another aspect to what we do. However, I think, as we know, COVID itself has presented us with extreme challenges as businesses: immediate cash flow disruption, shortage or loss of funds due to damage, reduced access to capital, and cancelled orders or increased the costs as supply chains have become increasingly stretched. It became quite clear very early on that as an innovation agency, we had to do something different. So I used to stand in platforms and say that we are not life support for small businesses. I had to turn that on its head and say that's exactly what we are, at least in the short term, to protect R&D investment in particular. So what we did was I called my team together and said, we're going to run a fast start competition. We're going to make £20 million available. We're going to have maximum grants of £50,000. We're going to pay that all in advance, something we never did. And also, we're going to ask 4 questions, not 10, and deliver the money within 4 weeks. And frankly, the reaction was horror. And then, how do we make this happen? And so I'm pleased to say that the business secretary was pleased with the idea, doubled the funding to £40 million. We received, in the 10 days the competition was open, 8,600 applications. We actually chose to internally and to externally assess. So we had 20,000 assessments taking place, 3 for each application. And at the end of that, we've funded now, I think, just over 900 businesses, each of them now in receipt of the funding ahead of the project starting. And I couldn't have done that without a great team. And the great team couldn't have done it without all working remotely. Because if we'd had to have been in Swindon, all collected together, the first problem would have been, could we get a meeting room? The second problem was not all the team could have been there because some would have been stuck in trains somewhere. And thirdly, there'd have been 101 reasons as to why we shouldn't do this. But actually working remotely allowed us to do that. And the second harebrained scheme I had said is, we're going to have to ask the Chancellor for a lot of money. And so over the course of a weekend, actually the weekend just after the one that Mark referred to with the ventilators, we began to sketch out what a recovery package might look like. And that culminated in an announcement from the Chancellor of £750 million of additional innovation support. That covers 3 main topics. The first one is £200 million has been accelerated and brought forward to help address cash flow problems for companies that are already in receipt of Innovate grants. So we've been able to accelerate payments to 2,500 existing customers. And the remaining £550 million was split into two different support schemes. One is £300 million that are available in continuity grants and continuity loans. So if your business had been impacted by COVID and you were in a receipt of Innovate funding, then you could have applied for a grant straight away. And we actually made over £100 million available for that, and the vast majority of that has now been committed. The second thing we said is if you need more than £250,000, apply for an innovation loan. The difference with innovation loans is that will be available through the balance of the year. So we have £150 million to give away in continuity loans to businesses that have an Innovate grant that want to make major investments to pivot into new markets or to address new opportunities with significant investment that will transform their businesses. And the third one is actually the Sustainable Innovation Fund that we'll come to in a minute. But I just want to highlight right now that UK Research and Innovation, of which Innovate UK is part of, actually has an open COVID call just now. So if you have a product or a service that can immediately address some of the impact of COVID-19, and you can do that within 18 months, you can still apply into the UKRI call directly. That remains open and will remain open for some time. But actually, the thing that I'm here to talk about most is the Sustainable Innovation Fund. And we need to be realistic. Our country is the first country in the world that has an ambition to be net zero by 2050. It's enshrined in law. We must do it. As an innovation agency, I think this offers us opportunity to invest in businesses that have sustainability at the forefront of what they're doing. And that can either be directly impacting energy demands or as a business making products and services more efficiently. So both of these are covered by the Sustainable Innovation Fund, and they're split into two specific models. The first one is what we've called a Small Business Research Initiative, which is a £10 million competition that opened on the 29th of June for feasibility studies around either the generation of green energy or using green energy as part of transforming your business, looking at how you could impact construction, for example, making materials, manufacturing into supply chain. So if you have an energy efficient idea, then the SBRI is the best call, because if you are successful with the feasibility study, a second round will open starting in January 2021, where up to £3 million per application will be available to turn those ideas into reality. The beauty of the SBRI contract is it's 100% funded, so we will take the risk for the idea with the aim that you will actually have an end customer as part of your collaboration. The other angle is going to be 3 calls on sustainable innovation, but for R&D throughout any sector. So you must have a sustainable element, but the first round was opened on the 29th of June. Grants of up to £175,000 are available just now. The competition is open. And that really covers, can you create a collaborative idea, or indeed an idea on your own, that will drive new products and services for the future, hence why we've got both a sustainable element, but as a response to COVID. And as I said earlier, one of the key things that we do at Innovate that we don't talk about too much is providing advice. So we've actually set aside £39 million to help support over 6,000 organisations through business advice, run mainly by the Enterprise Europe network. Now, in order to be a business that takes receipt of that support, you have to be either in receipt of an Innovate UK grant, have been identified by a local growth hub or the EEN advisors as a scale-up business, so you're doubling revenues every year, or you've had a Horizon Europe or a European grant and have also been considered as part of their scale-up. If you're any of those, again, please take the opportunity to get up to 5 days of advice for your business from experts that have been there and done it previously. And then eventually, out of this, I think will come opportunity. So I think our immediate response has been survive. The next effort we're going to put into is stabilize. And then I think at the start of the next financial year, you're going to see us launch some interesting growth packages alongside it. But we really have to, at the moment, bed down those great ideas. The R&D sector has to be allowed to thrive in a post-COVID environment. I see that very much as our job right now. But I would also say that business as usual also continues. So we still have the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund challenges, all 20 of them, all announcing competitions throughout the year. We still have access to loans facilities elsewhere. And one of the things that I'm most proud of during my tenure at Innovate is we've tried to bring the investment community much closer to early stage R&D. So we do that through what we call the investor partnerships model, where we take shared risk. So I will fund a project and the investor will help to support the company. And the reason for that is if you've had Innovate UK funding, it acts as a quasi kite mark, because it would demonstrate that if you've had Innovate grants in the past, you are 5 or 6 times more likely to be able to raise money in the private market. So that gives the investors the confidence to work with Innovate. And I used to tell a story when I was in a startup that I used to spend 9 months of the year raising money, 2 months congratulating myself that I'd raised money, and a month preparing for the next 9 months. So we're actually trying to reverse that cycle by getting committed investors on board much earlier. And I think that will reap dividends for the companies that have that support. And then I just finally say, if you have a need for specific skills to transform your business, don't forget about the Knowledge Transfer Partnership. It is the largest postgraduate training scheme in the UK that nobody talks about. There are 3 main reasons for doing that. First of all, you get cutting edge advice into your business from an academic environment to solve a specific problem. Secondly, the postdoc gets the chance to experience the business environment, bearing in mind that only 1% of postdocs become lecturers. That could be great for you. And thirdly, the company can accelerate the development through that process, and we will fund it. So don't forget about the KTPs. And also, while we're on the subject of knowledge transfer, if you have a need to look at supply chain, access to different funding, links to different partners, use the knowledge transfer network, or indeed with business growth, the Enterprise Europe network. And Gary, I think with that, I'll wrap up and allow the questions to begin. So thank you everybody for listening.
Ian, thanks so much for sharing what is a really comprehensive support package available now for our most innovative companies who are either pivoting their business towards new opportunities or investing more heavily in the product portfolios that they've got already. And I just want to take a quick sentiment on conducting a poll now, which is a bit forward-looking. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. I'm having problems with my tech here. Right, I'm going to drop the poll because we've got some great questions here. I was going to ask everybody what their innovation priorities were, whether it's financing, establishing new partnerships, investing in new tools and tech and things like that, but we can come back to that later. So we've got some great questions coming from our guests here, and I guess we'll just work through them. So, and one each. So Ashley's asking Mark, some classic lean and agile methodologies cutting across organizations in both a vertical and horizontal perspective. This must have acted like a breath of fresh air instead of F1 racing. Do you think the lessons learned will help improve the F1 supply chains, innovation and design cycle?
So actually, it's a really good question, and I think I don't know about breath of fresh air, because it's certainly the F1 sort of governance team that we're working with. It was probably the hardest, well, without doubt, the hardest that we'd all worked together. But in terms of lessons learned, I think the integration and the ability to work at pace, and it almost takes the other question above it, Gary, in terms of competitive group of people working together as one team, and maybe that's seen as maybe something which is a bit strange, but actually, sometimes if you have a group of competitors who literally work together, and that's what they are part of a bigger organization, which is the Formula One circus. And it was really not a surprise at all that they clubbed together. And to give an example, the last race I won actually at Williams back in the day in 2012, it was in Barcelona, and we actually had a fire in the garage, and we lost 90% of our hardware. And we were going to Monaco, one of the most difficult races to go the next week. And the teams, without even asking, gave us the kit to go racing the next week. So we'd already beaten the competition the week previous, but they gave us their kit to make sure that everything worked and moved ahead. And that just gives you a feel for the whilst competitive nature, but very much a bigger team. And I think just in terms of the last piece, in terms of the supply chain, the one piece that the ventilator challenge gave, which the teams maybe hadn't got, was a much wider knowledge of that supply chain, because we used the whole innovation network, which was the catapults, the KTN, which Ian mentioned, and things even like PCBs that went into the electronics of those ventilators. They were able to get hold of suppliers that they had never previously contacted. So there was a benefit as well from the F1 teams in this whole process.
And Mark, just a quick follow-up on that, was it, the co-creation element where you've got, different people from different sectors coming together, was that a powerful force involved in that too?
It was, and actually it was a wider issue. So, I've had discussions with very large companies since this, outside of even F1. And I think that this co-creation and handling of IP that has been created during the process at pace. Traditionally, you would have been tied up in legalese for quite a while prior to the anything kicking off. This forced the consortium and all sorts, from the Airbuses and Fords of this world through to sort of very small startups manufacturing tiny componentry that goes in, say, to a trolley for a ventilator, to work together and at pace, and to handle that issue in terms of IP live during the process, either with the Cabinet Office or whoever. I think that was a real learning process, which after the event, everybody's still looking at how do we learn from this and make sure that we maybe don't tie ourselves in knots and go back to the way that we used to work.
It's brilliant. Andrew, there's a question from Janice here for you in terms of the digital twinning process. What's the kind of time saved using render and maybe pounds, shillings and pence as well on some of the projects you're doing with the large global clients that you work with?
Yeah. Well, on average, over the time that we've existed, it's been a saving of around sort of 2/3 of the typical journey, which, depending on the project, but that does, equate to quite a significant chunk of your budget. You're talking tens of thousands of pounds, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds, depending on the project. So yeah, there is a significant saving there for sure. I think the problem is I don't really think that this is going to become the norm quickly enough. What we're finding in the industry is that a lot of design and engineering companies are not adopting this quickly enough, and therefore that kind of falling behind. Innovation's falling behind. So it's fantastic to see. Obviously, Mark's example there was particularly impressive, and to have those tools available to be able to collaborate like that was fantastic. But we really hope as a company that does become the norm, and that that culture is something that becomes the norm after this. It's all very well having the time and the financial savings, but having that collaboration culture, I think, is probably the most worthwhile for long-term innovation.
And Dr. Malik's asking there about the role of 3D printing And, you know, making a physical product at the end of it. Is that sit in your design flow? Is that your product development flow? Is that part and parcel of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, interestingly, we were kind of talking a little bit about that before the event. You know, digital twinning is a fantastic tool because it allows you to shorten that design journey. And, you know, if a lot of the engineering within your product, for example, within a ventilator, for example, if a lot of the engineering already exists, or a lot of the design already exists and it's tried and tested, there's little need to actually prototype that, you know, which is traditionally what you would kind of do. You know, you would prototype a model in full. Whereas if there are bespoke parts of that model, it's better to maybe use the likes of 3D printing if you can, because it's a very quick production method. It can be very cheap and therefore low risk. So when we are developing products, yes, we do use 3D printing quite regularly, but it's more about, you know, taking a small percentage of a product and testing that rather than, you know, 3D printing an entire model, if you like. So yeah, it's a fantastic tool, and definitely it's a good time saver.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks so much, Andy. Ian, I wonder if you could maybe pick up on Rav Roberts' question. So it's your domain, HealthTech. He's not a recipient of Innovate UK funding today, but his product can significantly help people during the pandemic. And what's the kind of process for him? Where does he fit in that kind of group of companies that might be eligible for Innovate UK support?
Yeah, so there are three main elements of support you could go after. So immediately, the call that's open just now offers the prospect of £175,000 through the revised EU framework, which helps with state aid classification for the moment. Secondly, and I did announce this last week, but I'll reiterate it, there will be a £30 million biomedical catalyst call coming out at the end of July. And that will be specifically geared to health tech, and that will include digital health as well as new therapeutics and new diagnostics. And then thirdly, at the end of August, the next round of our smart funding will start, and you could either through the biomedical catalyst or through the smart round receive grants anywhere up to £2.4 million for great ideas. Now, I have to be quite clear, the average grant size is £150,000. So if you're asking for £2.4 million, be sure to be able to justify it, but the opportunity is there.
Absolutely brilliant. That's great that there's an option for Rav there, and I'm sure he'll pursue that with us. This might be, I know Mark's touched on this a little bit, but the questions come in here. How are attitudes changing about protecting innovation developments in IP towards sharing these to accelerate the process and multiple beneficiaries? Is there, have we started a trend now? We're seeing a trend where people are just a little bit less precious and more open to kind of sharing the spoils? That's for everybody. See, you know, if you've got experience with that.
So two things. So our research shows that collaboration leads to better innovation and better outcomes. So, and I simplify this down. If you have 4 eyes and 2 brains looking at the same problem, you'll come up with multiple combinations, and the best ones will surface. So we have very much believed in collaboration for a long time. We also support businesses that have no IP, all the way through to businesses that patent everything. And so the patent is not the value, it's how you exploit it. And the patent, I used to work for a company that says that don't publish a patent because it just tells everybody how you're doing and therefore informs them how you might want to get around it. So there are various models for IP. I think the important thing is accelerating innovation. And I think defining innovation is important. It's not invention, it's the successful commercial exploitation of an idea. And it can apply to a product or a service. It doesn't have to be a bright, white, shiny gadget. It could be software, it could be in the services, it could be in the processes. And I think we get caught up too often in innovation being a technology, but it can equally be a product or a service. Right. Or a process.
Yeah, yeah. And Andy, are you seeing any kind of practices emerging at your end? Are you seeing companies buddy up with each other and share stuff?
Yeah, definitely. There is more collaboration happening. I have to say it has been more focused around sort of COVID specific projects, if you like. So a very simple one is, there was a client that came to us with a new PPE design, and they actually collaborated with another couple of companies to get that up and running. Produced and sent out and used by NHS workers and also care home workers. So that collaboration was absolutely key to progressing there. They didn't take any interest in securing IP. It was something that they brought up initially, but I think the attitudes changed because of the purpose of the project. I think time will tell, if I'm completely honest, whether IP becomes more or less important after this. But certainly any COVID related projects, the attitudes, you can certainly see the attitudes changing there. So hopefully that will have a knock-on effect to other projects, once we enter the new normal.
Absolutely brilliant. We've got a question here from Tracy saying the F1 story is fascinating. Has there been a short case study written that you might share, in particular interest about supply chain involvement? So that's sovereign supply chain. As UK developers, are we really aware of all the advanced manufacturing that's on our doorstep, or are we still kind of looking internationally for those sorts of solutions?
Gary, we're absolutely aware of the supply chain, and that's something with this conflicted bill of materials we were really careful to handle, and even reverse engineering solutions where there was a conflicted item which maybe was outside of the UK. So the resilience piece is key. In terms of case studies, there's been some pieces written, but probably not to the level of detail, and that's something which I think is definitely on our to-do list from a thought leadership perspective. I mean, some of the activity, just following on even from the previous question, to give you a feel, on that CPAP device, which Mercedes and UCL were doing, they were doing 1,000 a day, and then they went up to their 10,000 limit, and then gave that out as a license-free capability to manufacture across the world. And that just shows you the humanitarian sort of effort that the companies were working with, and the willing to share it at pace, the information. So I mean, it's been a fantastic experience just seeing how companies have sort of risen to the challenge.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Look, we more questions are being added all the time, and we'll make sure that they all get answered at some point. But we're pretty much through our hour. It's gone past in the blink of an eye. Lots of people to thank here. Firstly, huge thanks to our panelists, Mark, Andrew and Ian, for great presentations and great insights. And also our friends at CBI, the Institute of Directors, Federation of Small Businesses, Chartered Institute of Procurement Supply, and our Global Tech Advocate community. And a big thanks to you, our guests, for your support, for your questions, and all the amazing innovation you do that keeps Britain brilliant. So we'll email you over the next couple of days. We'll email you a link to the presentation materials, and I think some other useful assets and pointers around what's emerging for innovation support for you, because it looks like there's a great feast to be had if you apply in the right way. So thanks everyone for a great session. See you all soon and have a wonderful day. Take care.
Bye.
Cheers.